I'm sitting in my Denver apartment at 2:17 a.m., staring at the legal documents spread across my coffee table like evidence from a crime scene. The papers are thick, official looking, and they all have one thing in common: my name typed in as the designated guardian for my 89-year-old grandmother's estate. The problem? I never agreed to any of this. In fact, I had no idea these documents existed until 3 hours ago when I found them hidden in my sister's purse during what I thought was a casual family dinner. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about legal documents or family manipulation. It's about how people you've trusted your entire life can orchestrate an elaborate scheme that would make corporate fraud look amateur. 3 weeks ago, on a rainy Tuesday evening, I got a text from my sister Emma. Family meeting Sunday, grand situation getting serious, need everyone there. At first glance, nothing unusual. We've been having these monthly meetings since Gran started showing mild signs of confusion 6 months earlier. What I didn't expect was to walk into an ambush so carefully orchestrated that it would have impressed a military strategist. I should have noticed the signs. The timing was suspicious. Emma, who usually struggled to get everyone together for major holidays, suddenly managed to coordinate schedules for 5 adults, plus children on a random Sunday afternoon. The location was strategic, Mom and Dad's house, where childhood conditioning would make me most likely to comply with authority. Even the weather seemed to cooperate with their plans, with early December snow keeping everyone indoors and focused. When I arrived at 2 p.m. sharp, the scene was set like a stage production. Mom had made Gran's favorite lemon cake from scratch, the same recipe she'd used for every special occasion of my childhood. The dining room table was set with the good china, the spode pattern that only emerged for Christmas and graduations. Dad wore his navy cardigan, the one he called his serious conversation sweater. Emma and her husband Derek sat strategically positioned with their twins, 8-year-old Chloe and Connor, who were unusually well-behaved and quietly coloring at the children's table. Even my brother Marcus had driven down from Portland with his girlfriend Stephanie, a 3-hour trip he rarely made for anything short of a major holiday. Gran sat at the head of the table in her favorite green dress, the one that brought out her eyes. She looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile, but her smile was genuine when she saw me. "Michael, sweetheart," she said, reaching for my hand. "Isn't this nice? All my grandchildren together." The formal pleasantries felt rehearsed. Mom bustling around serving cake and coffee, asking repeatedly if everyone had enough. Dad making small talk about the weather and the Broncos' disappointing season. Emma fussing over the twins with unusual attention to detail, making sure they had exactly the right crayons and stayed occupied. Marcus checking his phone constantly, typing messages I later realized were coordinating with other family members who weren't present but were very much involved in the plan. "Michael," Mom began, her voice pitched unnaturally high with nervous energy. "We need to discuss something important about Gran's future care arrangements." I should have seen it coming right then. The way Emma immediately straightened in her chair. How Dad cleared his throat and reached for the manila folder that had been sitting conspicuously by his elbow since I arrived. The meaningful glance exchanged between Marcus and Derek. Even Gran seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere, looking around the table with growing confusion. But I was focused on the wrong things. I noticed how thin Gran had gotten, how her wedding ring now spun loosely on her finger. I saw the slight tremor in her hands as she reached for her coffee cup. I was worried about her health, her well-being, her happiness in the assisted living facility where she'd moved 6 months earlier. I wasn't thinking about money, assets, or inheritance. That was my first mistake. "The assisted living facility is costing $8,000 a month," Dad announced without preamble, sliding a computer printout across the table toward me. The paper was warm from the printer, clearly prepared just minutes before my arrival. At this rate, her savings won't last another 18 months. I picked up the document, scanning columns of numbers that seemed astronomical. Rent, meals, housekeeping, medical care, activities, transportation. Line items that added up to a figure that made my own mortgage payment look like pocket change. $8,000? I repeated, trying to process the number. "That seems unsustainable," Emma finished, leaning forward with practiced urgency. "Which is why we found a solution that keeps her in the family where she belongs." She opened the manila folder with the flourish of a magician, revealing a trick, spreading out documents that I now realized they'd been preparing for weeks. "You would become her legal guardian. The state provides financial assistance for family caregivers. Plus, she could move in with you." My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step on a staircase. "Move in with me? Your apartment has that extra bedroom you use as an office," Mom said quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush that suggested extensive rehearsal. "It's perfect for her needs. Close to your bathroom, lots of natural light, quiet neighborhood. She'd be so happy living with her favorite grandson," Emma added, the manipulation so obvious it was almost insulting. Gran had never expressed preference among her grandchildren, treating us all with equal affection and attention. Gran looked around the table with growing bewilderment. "Are we having a party?" she asked, her confusion evident. "Did I forget someone's birthday?" That's when Marcus spoke up for the first time since the discussion began. "The guardian gets control of her estate too. Her house, the life insurance, investments, everything." His tone was carefully neutral, but I caught the implication immediately. They all knew about Grand's substantial assets, and they'd done their homework about what guardianship actually meant. I stared at them, pieces beginning to click into place. You've already researched the legal process. Derek nodded enthusiastically, pulling out his phone to show me bookmarked websites about Colorado guardianship law. Emma's been working with an attorney for the past month. The paperwork's mostly complete. We just need your signature to make it official. My signature for what exactly? I asked, though I was beginning to understand the scope of what they were proposing. Guardian of person and estate, Dad said matter-of-factly, like he was discussing weekend plans. It's really just a formality. Someone has to be legally responsible for her daily care and financial management. The room fell silent, except for Gran humming softly to herself, a habit she'd developed when she felt anxious or confused. I looked around the table at faces I'd known my entire life and suddenly saw them with startling clarity. Emma's practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus surreptitiously calculating something on his phone, probably inheritance percentages. Mom and Dad exchanging meaningful looks that spoke of private conversations and predetermined strategies. The children's coloring had become more vigorous, their crayons scraping against paper with unusual intensity. Even they seemed to sense the tension, though they couldn't understand its source. Connor looked up at me with innocent curiosity. Uncle Michael, are you going to live with Great-Gran? I need time to think about this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The attorney consultation is scheduled for Tuesday, Emma announced, consulting her planner with theatrical precision. Everything's already arranged. The appointment is at 10 a.m. Tuesday. 2 days away. The same rushed timeline I'd read about in online forums discussing family financial manipulation. The artificial urgency designed to prepare for consideration or outside consultation. I felt trapped between their expectations and a decision that would fundamentally alter my life. Why Tuesday? I asked. The attorney has limited availability, Derek explained smoothly. These guardianship cases are time sensitive. The longer we wait, the more complicated the legal process becomes. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of the very bedroom they wanted to convert into Gran's living space, trying to process what had just happened. My home office, where I'd built my consulting business over the past 5 years, where client calls and project deadlines filled my days, they saw it as the perfect elder care facility. I kept thinking about Gran's house in Littleton, the modest ranch-style home where she'd lived for 43 years. I'd helped her plant the rose garden that bloomed every summer. We'd shared countless Sunday dinners at the kitchen table where she taught me to play gin rummy and told stories about my grandfather's war service. The house was worth easily $800,000 in today's market, maybe more given the neighborhood's recent development. There was also her life insurance policy, which I'd glimpsed once in her kitchen drawer when helping her organize papers. The face value had been $650,000, a significant sum accumulated through decades of small monthly payments, and the vintage jewelry collection she'd inherited from her mother, pieces she'd mentioned leaving to someone responsible who would appreciate their history. But mostly, I thought about what being her legal guardian actually meant. Not just the financial control, but the daily reality. Making medical decisions when she couldn't. Managing her medications, her diet, her social interactions. Watching her cognitive decline while struggling to balance my own career and personal life. And underneath it all, the uncomfortable knowledge that my family would be monitoring every decision, second-guessing every expense, calculating every impact on their eventual inheritance. The next morning, Monday, I called the law office myself. I'm Michael Chen, I told the receptionist. I believe my family scheduled a consultation about my grandmother's guardianship. Oh yes, Mr. Chen, she said with practiced cheerfulness. Your sister provided extensive documentation about your grandmother's situation. She mentioned you're the natural choice since you're single with no children, and you have the most flexible schedule. Single with no children. As if my marital status and career flexibility made me automatically available for a life-altering commitment. As if my own goals, relationships, and future plans were irrelevant considerations. I hung up feeling manipulated and angry, immediately calling in sick to work. Something about this situation demanded my full attention and investigation. I drove to Gran's house in Littleton, using the spare key she'd given me years earlier for emergencies. She was at her Monday morning bridge club at the assisted living facility, a standing appointment she'd maintained religiously since moving there. But I needed to see her former living situation with clear, objective eyes. The house was immaculate. Bills were organized in labeled folders in her antique secretary desk. Medications were arranged in a weekly dispenser system that showed careful attention to dosing schedules. The refrigerator contained healthy food with recent expiration dates. Her bed was made with military precision, a habit from her years as an Army wife. Signs of mild confusion, yes, misplaced reading glasses, a coffee cup in the bathroom, a grocery list with duplicate items, but nothing suggesting someone who needed immediate guardianship or couldn't manage basic daily tasks. In her kitchen junk drawer, underneath recipe clippings and rubber bands, I found what I was looking for. The life insurance policy, updated just 8 months ago. $650,000 with her 4 grandchildren listed as equal beneficiaries. A will dated 6 months ago, professionally prepared and notarized, leaving her house and remaining assets split between the same 4 grandchildren. Bank statements showing nearly $400,000 in savings accounts and certificates of deposit, all earning modest but steady interest. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Have you decided about tomorrow? The lawyer needs confirmation of attendance. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drove to Sunrise Manor, the assisted living facility where Gran had lived since June. The community was pleasant, with well-maintained gardens and cheerful common areas where residents played cards and watched afternoon movies. I asked to speak with the administrator about my grandmother's account. Mrs. Rodriguez was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the patience of someone who'd spent years working with elderly residents and their families. She looked confused when I mentioned the $8,000 monthly cost my family had quoted. Your grandmother's monthly fee is $3,200, she said, checking her computer files. That includes her studio apartment, 3 meals daily, housekeeping twice weekly, laundry service, and access to all activities. She pays quarterly in advance and has never been late with a payment. What about additional medical care or special services? Her health insurance covers her doctor visits and prescription medications. She's actually one of our most independent residents. Plays bridge twice a week, takes the shopping van to King Soopers every Wednesday, manages her own medications with minimal supervision. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled warmly. She's become something of a social coordinator here. Last month, she organized a talent show that raised $400 for the activities fund. I sat in the parking lot afterward, my hands gripping the steering wheel as pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The fabricated financial crisis, the rushed timeline, the pre-completed legal documents. My family wasn't trying to help Gran. They were orchestrating a sophisticated takeover of her assets using me as their unwitting accomplice. The math was simple and damning. Gran's actual expenses were less than half what they claimed. Her current financial situation was stable, sustainable, and carefully managed. She was thriving in her chosen living arrangement, maintaining independence and social connections. The only crisis was manufactured, designed to create urgency and justify drastic action. That evening, my phone started ringing with military precision. First Emma at 6:30, then Mom at 7:15, then Dad at 8. I let them all go to voicemail, listening to their messages with growing disgust. Emma's voice was carefully modulated, hitting all the emotional notes she'd probably practiced. Michael, we're all counting on you to do the right thing here. Gran needs family support, not strangers making decisions about her life. She raised us to take care of each other. Mom's message was more direct, tinged with the guilt she'd perfected over 31 years of motherhood. Honey, please call back. We need to discuss this as a family. Your father and I are worried about your attitude. This isn't like you to be so uncooperative when family needs help. Dad's message carried the authoritative tone that had sent me to my room throughout childhood. Son, this is about responsibility and stepping up when it matters. Gran took care of all of us when we needed it. Now it's our turn to take care of her. By 9 p.m., Marcus had joined the campaign with a series of increasingly frustrated text messages. Dude, what's your problem? Just sign the papers. This is bigger than your comfort zone. Family first. Derek says the lawyer slot might get filled by someone else if we don't confirm. You're being selfish. Think about Gran. I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of wine, sitting on my couch in the quiet apartment they wanted to transform into an elderly care facility. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to examine my relationship with my family objectively. Growing up, I'd been the reliable one, the child who did homework without reminders, who helped with dishes without being asked, who mediated between Emma and Marcus when they fought. In high school, I'd worked part-time jobs to pay for my own car while Emma received one as a birthday gift. In college, I'd taken student loans while Marcus had his education funded by our parents' savings. The pattern had continued into adulthood. When Emma needed help with her down payment, I'd co-signed her mortgage application. When Marcus got laid off 3 years ago, I'd loaned him $8,000 that he'd never repaid. When Mom and Dad wanted to take their dream cruise, I'd contributed to the family fund that made it possible. I'd been groomed for this moment my entire life, the responsible one, the single one with no competing obligations, the one who could be counted on to sacrifice personal goals for family needs. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold, with forecast snow that would make the lawyer's office treacherous to reach. Perfect weather for staying home and avoiding commitments. My phone showed 17 missed calls from various family members and a final text from Marcus. Lawyer appointment in 2 hours. Don't let the family down. I drove to the law office, but not to sign papers. I had questions that demanded answers. The building was modern glass and steel in downtown Denver's business district, the kind of place that charged $400 per hour for consultations. Attorney Patricia Williams was younger than I'd expected, probably early 40s, with sharp gray eyes behind designer glasses and the confident demeanor of someone who'd built a successful practice on family law complexities. Mr. Chen, she said, gesturing to a leather chair across from her mahogany desk. Your family speaks very highly of your dedication to your grandmother's well-being. What exactly did they tell you about her situation? I asked, pulling out a small notebook I'd brought to document the conversation. She consulted a thick file folder, flipping through pages of notes and documentation. Let me see. Moderate dementia with increasing confusion, living unsafely alone in a large house, financial mismanagement, including missed bill payments, family consensus that you're the most appropriate guardian given your availability, and strong relationship with her. Each item on the list was a carefully crafted distortion of the truth. She lives in assisted living, not alone in a house. She manages her own finances with help from the facility's staff. Her cognitive issues are mild and don't interfere with daily functioning. Did they mention any of that? Patricia's expression shifted subtly, professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. Perhaps we should reschedule this consultation until you've had more time to discuss the situation with your family members. I think that's very wise. My family was waiting in the building's lobby like a greeting committee from hell. The moment they saw me walk out of the elevator without signed papers, their carefully maintained facades cracked and fell away. What the hell is wrong with you? Marcus hissed, grabbing my elbow with enough force to leave bruises. We've been planning this for weeks. Gran needs proper care, Emma insisted, tears appearing on command with the skill of a trained actress. You're abandoning her when she needs family most. You're being selfish and immature, Dad said, his voice carrying that commanding tone that had once made me scramble to comply. This is about doing what's right, not what's convenient for your lifestyle. Derek stepped forward, trying to play peacemaker with corporate negotiation techniques. Look, Michael, we understand this feels overwhelming, but we're all here to support you through the transition period. I spoke directly with her assisted living facility, I said calmly, watching their faces for reactions. She's doing fine. Monthly rent is $3,200, not $8,000. She's independent, social, and happy with her living arrangement. Silence fell like a physical weight. Then Emma's face flushed deep red, the anger she'd been suppressing finally breaking through. You went behind our backs to check up on our information? Like you went behind my back to arrange legal consultations? We were trying to help the family make informed decisions, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. By lying about Gran's expenses and condition? Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. You have no idea how complicated this situation really is. There are debts you don't know about, medical expenses that aren't covered, future care needs that will bankrupt her if we don't act now. What debts? I asked, pulling out my phone to record the conversation. I've seen her bank statements. Everything's current and organized. The family exchanged panicked glances. Dad cleared his throat. Some things are private, Michael. Adult children don't need to know every detail of their grandparents' financial situation. But I would need to know if I became her legal guardian, wouldn't I? No one answered. That night, I called Gran directly from the privacy of my apartment. Her voice was clear and cheerful when she answered her room phone. How are you feeling about your living situation at Sunrise Manor? I asked without preamble. Oh, I love it here, Michael. The ladies are so nice, and we have such fun together. Tonight we're having a movie night, The Sound of Music. I haven't seen that in years. She paused, curiosity creeping into her voice. Why do you ask, sweetheart? Just checking in. Some family members thought you might be happier living with one of us instead of staying there. Gran was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried echoes of the sharp intelligence that had made her a successful teacher for 35 years. Michael, honey, I've raised 4 children and managed a classroom of 30 teenagers for decades. I know when people are trying to make decisions for me. She sighed softly. I chose to move here because I wanted independence with security. I'm not ready to give up my autonomy. You know I love you, right? Whatever happens with these family discussions, that won't change. Of course, dear. You're such a good boy. You always have been. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, finally understanding the full scope of what my family had planned. Not just legal guardianship, but effective control over a woman who was still capable of making her own decisions. Not just financial management, but access to assets that could solve various family members' money problems. Wednesday brought escalation tactics that would have impressed a military strategist. Mom called my workplace, speaking to my supervisor, Rebecca, about family responsibilities and my concerning avoidance behavior regarding my grandmother's care needs. She painted a picture of an elderly woman in crisis and a grandson who was selfishly refusing to help. Emma showed up at my apartment building during lunch hour, cornering my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, in the mailroom. According to Mrs. Patterson's later account, Emma tearfully explained that I was abandoning my grandmother in her time of greatest need, that the family was devastated by my cruel behavior, and that they were praying I would come to my senses before it was too late. By Thursday, the pressure campaign had expanded to include extended family members I barely saw except at weddings and funerals. Uncle Robert, Dad's brother who lived in Colorado Springs, called about family obligations and honoring thy elders. His wife, Aunt Diane, sent a long email recounting stories about how Gran had always preferred me among her grandchildren and would be heartbroken if I didn't step up in her hour of need. Cousin Jennifer, Emma's friend from college who'd somehow been recruited into the campaign, left a voicemail about how her own grandmother had died alone and forgotten because family members had refused to make sacrifices. The emotional manipulation was obvious, but still effective. I found myself questioning whether I was being heartless, whether my concerns about autonomy and independence were just selfish justifications for avoiding responsibility. Even Father Martinez from Gran's Catholic Church called, leaving a message about honoring thy grandmother and the Christian duty to care for elderly family members. The fact that my family had recruited her priest into their campaign revealed the depth of their desperation and the breadth of their strategy. Friday evening brought the most disturbing call yet. Mrs. Rodriguez from Sunrise Manor sounded genuinely concerned when she reached me at home. "Mr. Chen, I wanted you to know that several family members have been calling about your grandmother's deteriorating condition and urgent need for family intervention," she said carefully. "I feel obligated to tell you that none of these concerns match our daily observations. Mrs. Ma Chen won bowling last night and is organizing a Valentine's Day dance for next month." "They're calling you directly?" "Your sister Emma called 3 times this week asking about medical incidents that haven't occurred. Your brother Marcus wanted copies of her medication records, which we can't provide without her written consent. Your parents asked about emergency contacts and whether we'd observed any dangerous behaviors." I thanked her for the information and hung up, finally understanding that my family's campaign extended far beyond personal pressure. They were building a case, creating a paper trail of concerns that could be used to justify guardianship proceedings, whether I cooperated or not. That weekend, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my entire life. Instead of continuing to react to their pressure tactics, I would take control of the situation and advocate directly for Gran's wishes. Saturday afternoon, I visited Gran at Sunrise Manor with a specific agenda. We sat in the facility's garden room, where winter sunlight streamed through large windows and residents tended small container gardens that brightened the space with unexpected color. "Gran, I need to ask you some direct questions about what you want for your future," I said, taking her hands in mine. "Some family members think you might be happier living with one of us instead of staying here." Gran looked around the garden room, where her friend Dorothy was watering African violets and Mr. Peterson was reading a newspaper in his favorite chair. "I like living here, Michael. My friends are here, the food is good, and I have my own space. I worked hard my whole life to be independent. Why would I want to give that up now?" "Some people might think you need more family supervision, more help with daily tasks." Gran's eyes cleared in that way they sometimes did, showing flashes of the formidable woman who'd managed classrooms full of teenagers and raised 4 children largely alone while my grandfather served overseas. "Michael, sweetheart, I may be old and occasionally forgetful, but I'm not stupid. I know when people are trying to manage me for their own convenience." She pointed to the activities calendar posted on the garden room wall. "I play bridge on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I help with the book club on Wednesdays. I volunteer in the children's reading program at the library every Saturday morning. I take water aerobics classes 3 times a week." Her voice grew stronger with each item. "This isn't warehousing elderly people. This is a community where I have friends, routines, and purpose. What if the family insists that someone needs legal authority to help you manage finances and medical decisions?" Gran was quiet for several minutes, watching Dorothy carefully transplant seedlings into larger pots. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades making difficult decisions. "I've been thinking about that possibility. Last month, I consulted with an attorney about updating my legal documents." She looked directly at me, her gaze steady and determined. "I don't want any family member to have guardianship over me or my assets while I'm still mentally competent to make my own decisions." That conversation marked a turning point. On Monday morning, I requested a meeting with Patricia Williams, alone this time, without family interference. I brought documentation, Gran's bank statement showing careful financial management, the assisted living facility's assessment confirming her independence, even a note from her doctor confirming her mental competency for legal and financial decisions. "Your family painted a very different picture of her situation," Patricia admitted, reviewing my evidence with professional concern. "They want control of her assets. I would be the guardian in name only, with them making the real decisions behind the scenes." Patricia leaned back in her chair, pen tapping against her legal pad. "Guardianship fraud is a serious crime, Mr. Chen. Using false information to gain control over a competent adult's assets can result in criminal charges. What would you advise in this situation? I'd advise your grandmother to consult with an elder law attorney about protecting her autonomy and assets, and I'd advise you to document all attempts at pressure or coercion related to this guardianship proposal." That afternoon, I called a family meeting on my terms, not at my parents' house where childhood dynamics would favor their authority, but at Sunrise Manor in the community room where Gran could participate directly in decisions about her own future. I sent a group text. "Family meeting Saturday 2 p.m. at Gran's facility, community room. Gran will be participating in discussions about her own care. Mandatory attendance for anyone who wants input on decisions affecting her life." The responses came quickly and revealed their panic. "Emma, why there? That's inconvenient for everyone with children." "Marcus, this isn't how family meetings work. Parents' house is traditional. You don't get to dictate terms, son." "Sweetie, let's discuss this privately first." I responded to all. 2 p.m. Saturday, community room. Gran's life, Gran's input required. They arrived separately, faces set in matching expressions of determination mixed with apprehension. Emma brought Derek and the twins, clearly planning to use the children as emotional props. Marcus came alone. Stephanie had apparently declined to participate in what she later told me seemed like family drama with questionable motives. Mom and Dad presented a united front, dressed in their church clothes as if attending a formal occasion. Gran sat beside me, wearing her favorite blue dress with pearl earrings, looking more alert and composed than I'd seen her in months. The community room setting put her on home turf, surrounded by familiar faces and the comfortable routines of her chosen living situation. I asked everyone here, I began, my voice steady with newfound confidence, because we need to discuss Gran's future honestly, with her full participation in decisions that affect her life. Finally, Emma muttered, though her tone suggested this wasn't the outcome she'd expected. Gran, would you like to tell everyone what you told me about living here? Gran's voice was clear and firm, carrying echoes of the classroom authority she'd wielded for decades. I like my home here. I have friends, activities, and independence. I don't want to be a burden to anyone, and I don't want to give up the life I've built here. You wouldn't be a burden, Mom said quickly, leaning forward with practiced concern. Michael has that extra room, and we'd all help with your care. Which is my home office, I interjected calmly, where I work from home 3 days a week, conduct client calls, and manage my consulting business. Dad leaned forward, voice dropping to that commanding tone he'd used throughout my childhood. Family takes care of family, Michael. That's what we do. You're absolutely right, I said, pulling out a folder I'd prepared, which is why I've arranged for professional geriatric care management, someone qualified to assess Gran's needs objectively and advocate for her wishes without conflicts of interest. The room went silent, except for the distant sounds of afternoon activities, someone playing piano in the music room, laughter from a card game in the adjacent lounge. Marcus was the first to recover from the shock. What does that mean exactly? It means Gran retains control of her assets and decisions, with professional support when needed. No guardianship transfer, no forced relocation, no family members making decisions about her life without her input. Emma's carefully maintained composure finally cracked like ice under pressure. You can't do this to us. We've already paid the lawyer. We've made arrangements. For a consultation I never authorized about a guardianship I never agreed to. This is about money, Marcus accused, his voice rising with anger and frustration. You want her inheritance for yourself. You want to control everything so we get nothing. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Several residents in the adjacent lounge looked over with curiosity, drawn by the elevated voices and obvious tension. Gran's hand slammed down on the coffee table between us with surprising force, rattling the water glasses and bringing immediate silence. Enough. Her voice carried echoes of the school principal who'd managed hundreds of teenagers, the woman who'd raised 4 children largely alone, the person who'd worked and saved and planned for 40 years to reach this point in her life. The family recoiled as if physically slapped. Gran continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. I am sitting right here, and I am tired of being discussed like I'm already dead or incompetent. I am tired of people making plans for my life without consulting me. Dad started to protest, but Gran cut him off with a gesture that brooked yield no argument. Robert, I changed my will 6 months ago specifically because I was worried about this kind of behavior. I've seen how you all look at my house when you visit, how the conversations always turn to my finances, how you calculate what my assets might be worth. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even the residents in the adjoining lounge had stopped their activities to listen. What do you mean? Emma whispered, her face pale with dawning realization. I mean, I'm not stupid, and I'm not senile, regardless of what you've told that attorney. Gran's eyes were sharp as winter sunlight, focused and determined. I see how you research property values in my old neighborhood. I know Marcus drove by my house 3 times last month taking pictures. I'm aware of Emma's questions about my insurance policies and investment accounts. Over the next hour, the truth emerged like water through a breaking dam. Gran had been far more aware of the family dynamics than any of us had realized. She'd observed Emma's increasing interest in her financial affairs, noticed Marcus researching assisted living costs and inheritance tax laws, watched Mom and Dad's sudden attention to her daily routines and medical appointments. 6 months ago, I consulted with an elder law attorney about protecting my autonomy and my assets. Gran explained with calm precision. My new will establishes a charitable trust. The income will support my care for as long as I live. After I'm gone, the remaining assets will be donated to educational scholarships and senior services programs. The silence that followed was profound and devastating. All of it? Emma finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. There are small bequests to each of my grandchildren, $5,000 each, enough for a nice vacation or a small emergency fund, but not enough to fight over or plan your financial futures around. Marcus stood abruptly, knocking over his chair in his haste. This is insane. You're giving away our inheritance to complete strangers. It was never your inheritance. Gran replied with the patience of someone who'd explained difficult concepts to reluctant students for 3 decades. It was my life's work, earned through 40 years of teaching and careful saving. I have the right to decide what happens to my own money. But we're family, Emma protested, tears streaming down her face with genuine anguish now rather than calculated manipulation. Yes, we are. And if you'd approached me with love and concern for my well-being instead of schemes to control my assets, we might have had a very different conversation. Derek gathered up the twins, who'd been growing increasingly uncomfortable with the adult tensions they couldn't understand. "We should go," he muttered, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "This isn't over," Marcus threatened, pointing at me with barely controlled fury. "There are legal ways to challenge mental competency. There are questions about undue influence." Gran smiled with the confidence of someone who'd anticipated every possible objection. "My mental competency has been professionally assessed by 2 independent physicians and a geriatric psychiatrist. My attorney videotaped our consultations to document my decision-making capacity. Most importantly, I made these choices freely, without pressure from anyone." As the family filed out in defeated silence, Gran reached for my hand. "Thank you for being the only one who asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I needed." That confrontation was 3 weeks ago. Since then, my relationship with my immediate family has essentially ended, but the consequences have been far more complex and surprising than I expected. Emma hasn't spoken to me directly, but her husband Derek called last week to apologize for their participation in what he now recognizes was attempted elder abuse. "Emma's been seeing a therapist," he admitted. "She's finally understanding how her relationship with money and family has been poisoning her connections with people she loves." Marcus sends occasional angry texts, mostly threats about legal action that never materialize. Last week's message was typical. "You've destroyed this family. Gran's lawyers won't return our calls. Hope you're happy with your manipulation." Mom calls once a week with updates that swing between guilt and genuine remorse. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she said during our most recent conversation. "I thought we were solving a problem, helping everyone involved. I didn't understand how it would look to you or to Gran." Dad maintains mostly silent, but his few comments suggest deep embarrassment about the situation. "I raised you to be responsible," he said during one brief phone call. "Maybe I should have raised you to be more questioning of authority, including mine." The most surprising developments have come from extended family members who weren't involved in the guardianship scheme. Aunt Linda, Mom's sister from Phoenix, called to say she suspected something was wrong with the family's approach and was proud of me for standing up for Gran's autonomy. "Your mother called me about the guardianship plan," she revealed. "When she described Gran as confused and financially irresponsible, I knew something was wrong. I visited Sunrise Manor last month when I was in town. Your grandmother is sharper than some people half her age." Cousin David, Uncle Robert's son, admitted he'd been pressured to support the guardianship plan but had refused to participate. "Dad wanted me to call you about family responsibilities," he said. "I told him if Gran was happy and safe, that should be the end of the discussion." Most importantly, my relationship with Gran has become deeper and more genuine than ever before. We have lunch every Sunday in Sunrise Manor's dining room, sharing meals with her friends and discussing everything from current events to family history to her decades of teaching experiences. Last week, she told me stories about her childhood during the Great Depression, how her family had survived by supporting each other without keeping score of debts and favors. "Real family help comes from love, not obligation," she said, "and it never comes with strings attached or hidden agendas." The care manager I hired has been everything my family claimed to offer, but with professional competence and genuine concern for Gran's wishes. Janet checks on her weekly, coordinates with her doctors when health issues arise, and handles insurance paperwork that Gran finds confusing. Gran maintains her independence while having expert support when needed. The cost is $500 monthly, compared to the thousands my family would have drained from her accounts for management fees and care expenses if the guardianship scheme had succeeded. I've learned profound lessons about family dynamics over the past month, how financial pressure reveals character in ways that ordinary interactions never do, how manipulation can masquerade as care, and how the people who claim to love you most might be the ones most willing to exploit that love for personal gain. My therapy sessions with Dr. Kim have helped me understand the patterns that made me vulnerable to this manipulation. "You were groomed from childhood to be the family's problem solver," she explained. "The responsible one who could be counted on to sacrifice personal goals for family needs. Breaking that pattern requires recognizing that your worth isn't measured by your willingness to comply with family pressure." Last month, I got promoted to senior consultant at my firm, an achievement that would have been impossible if I'd been managing full-time elder care. When I told Gran about the promotion, she clapped her hands with genuine delight. "I'm so proud of you, Michael. Your grandfather would have been proud too." Why? Because you chose what was right over what was easy. Because you protected someone who needed protection instead of taking advantage of someone who trusted you. The irony isn't lost on me. By refusing to exploit Gran's assets, I've gained something far more valuable than money. A genuine relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. We play Scrabble on Wednesday evenings in her apartment, using the set she's owned since the 1970s. She's teaching me to make her famous apple pie using recipes she's refined over 50 years. When she has confused moments, and they're becoming less frequent as her stress has decreased, I'm there because I want to be, not because legal documents compel my presence. Emma attempted one final manipulation strategy 2 weeks ago, bringing Chloe and Connor to visit Gran, and coaching them to ask why Uncle Michael doesn't want great Gran to live with family where she'll be properly loved. Gran shut down that approach immediately with the gentle firmness she'd perfected in decades of classroom management. Uncle Michael is the only family member who treats me like a person instead of a bank account, she told them calmly. He asks what I want instead of telling me what I need. The children looked confused, but Emma understood the message perfectly. She hasn't returned since then. I've started dating someone, Sarah, a social worker who understands family complexity from professional experience. When I explained the guardianship situation, she nodded with knowing recognition. Financial elder abuse is more common than people realize, she said. Usually, it's family members who pressure elderly relatives into unsuitable arrangements that benefit everyone except the elder person involved. I almost became part of the problem, but you didn't. That's what matters. And your grandmother's lucky to have someone who prioritized her wishes over family pressure. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and I'm spending it with Gran and the Sunrise Manor community. The facility hosts an annual dinner for residents and their families, featuring traditional foods and live music from local high school students. Sarah is joining us, excited to meet the grandmother I talk about constantly. Emma sent a group text this morning that I almost didn't read. Family dinner at 3 p.m. Everyone expected as usual. The casual assumption that previous events hadn't fundamentally changed our family dynamics was breathtaking in its denial of reality. I didn't respond. My family now consists of people who respect my choices and Gran's autonomy, who value relationships over financial gain, who understand that love doesn't come with hidden price tags or manipulative strings. As I write this update, Gran is napping in her favorite chair by the garden room window, a mystery novel open on her lap in afternoon sunlight, making her white hair look like spun silver. She's content, safe, and surrounded by friends who enjoy her company without calculating her net worth. I think about the alternative timeline where I'd sign those guardianship papers. Gran displaced from her chosen home, isolated in my apartment office, slowly losing her independence while my family managed her assets for their benefit. The gradual erosion of her autonomy, dignity, and social connections. The guilt I'd have felt watching her decline while knowing I'd enabled it. Instead, she's living her life on her own terms, with professional support when needed, and family relationships based on genuine affection rather than financial obligation. The care management bill arrives monthly, a modest expense that ensures Gran's well-being without compromising her independence. Her bank account remains under her control. Her medical decisions remain hers to make. Her daily routines reflect her preferences rather than family convenience. My phone buzzes with a text from Marcus. Gran's will contest lawyer wants to meet. This isn't over. I delete it without responding. Gran's mental competency has been professionally assessed multiple times. Her will was prepared by a reputable estate attorney with proper witnesses and detailed documentation of her decision-making process. Most importantly, she made these choices with full understanding of their consequences while surrounded by people who supported her autonomy rather than their own interests. This evening, I'm taking Gran to her favorite Italian restaurant for an early Thanksgiving celebration. She's been talking about their tiramisu for weeks, anticipating the meal with the enthusiasm she brings to all her chosen activities. As we walk to my car, she takes my arm for support, but not because she needs constant supervision or management. Michael, she says, thank you for letting me stay myself. Thank you for showing me what real family relationships look like. She squeezes my arm gently. Your grandfather used to say that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice and love freely given. Looking back over the past month, I realized the guardianship trap was never really about Gran's care or well-being. It was about control, money, and the assumption that I'd comply with family pressure like I had my entire life. By refusing to participate, I not only protected Gran's autonomy, but discovered my own strength and ability to resist manipulation, disguised as love. Tomorrow, when Sarah meets Gran over Thanksgiving dinner, she'll see exactly why I fought so hard to preserve her independence. She'll meet a woman who bowls competitively twice a week, volunteers in the facility's literacy program, organizes social events for her neighbors, and still makes the world's best apple pie from a recipe she's perfected over 50 years. Gran isn't a burden to be managed, an asset to be controlled, or a problem to be solved. She's a person deserving respect, dignity, and the fundamental right to choose her own path forward. That understanding, that recognition of her basic humanity, is the real inheritance she's given me. The knowledge that love doesn't demand surrender of autonomy, that family support shouldn't come with strings attached, that relationships built on mutual respect are worth more than any financial inheritance. These lessons will shape how I approach every relationship for the rest of my life. Have you ever been pressured by family to take on responsibilities that serve their interests more than the person supposedly being helped? How did you navigate the guilt, manipulation, and family pressure when you realized their motives weren't pure? Share your experiences in the comments below. Update 6 months later. I wanted to update everyone on how this situation has developed since my original post went viral with over 50,000 upvotes and hundreds of people sharing similar experiences with family financial manipulation. The response was overwhelming and helped me understand that this type of elder abuse is far more common than anyone wants to acknowledge. Gran is not just surviving, but truly thriving. Her cognitive function has actually improved significantly since the stress of family pressure and uncertainty ended. The care manager reports that she's more social, more engaged, and more confident in her daily decisions than she was 6 months ago. She's become something of a leader among Sunrise Manor residents. Last month, she started a current events discussion group that meets every Tuesday morning. She's convinced 3 other residents to join her weekly bridge games, creating a regular tournament that has expanded to include participants from 2 other assisted living facilities in the area. Most remarkably, she's begun volunteering again. Every Saturday, she takes the facility van to the local elementary school where she reads to kindergarten students as part of their literacy program. Watching her light up when she talks about her kids reminds me powerfully of the passionate educator she was for 35 years. The family situation has evolved in ways I never expected. Emma and I have had several long conversations over the past few months, including 2 sessions with a family therapist she found. The process has been painful, but ultimately healing. I was so focused on financial security that I lost sight of what really mattered, she admitted during our most recent conversation. I convinced myself we were helping Gran, but really, we were helping ourselves and using you to do it. Derek has been instrumental in Emma's process of understanding and change. He helped me see how my anxiety about money was making me treat people like problems to be solved instead of people to be loved, Emma said. Marcus has been slower to accept responsibility, but even he has begun to acknowledge the problems with our family's approach. Last month, he sent a brief text. Glad Gran is happy. Sorry about the lawyer threats. That was wrong. Mom and Dad have started calling more frequently, and our conversations have gradually become less guilt-laden and more genuine. Dad actually apologized last week, something I'd never heard him do in 31 years. I taught you to be responsible, but I never taught you that responsibility means thinking for yourself, not just doing what family expects, he said during a rare moment of vulnerability. I'm proud of how you stood up for what was right, even when it meant standing up to us. The most surprising development has been Sarah's integration into my life and my relationship with Gran. What started as dating has evolved into something deeper and more permanent. Last month, I proposed to Sarah in Gran's garden room at Sunrise Manor, with Gran serving as my co-conspirator in planning the surprise. She's the one, Gran told me weeks before the proposal. I can see it in how she looks at you and how you look at her. But more importantly, I see how she treats me, like a person with opinions and preferences, not like an obligation or a burden. Sarah said yes, and Gran immediately appointed herself chief wedding planner. I may be 89, but I still know how to organize an event, she declared. And this wedding is going to be the best celebration Denver has seen in decades. The engagement has given Gran a renewed sense of purpose and joy. She spends hours looking through bridal magazines, calling venues, and researching caterers with the thoroughness she once brought to lesson planning. For the first time since this whole crisis began, she has a project that makes her feel needed for her wisdom and experience rather than targeted for her assets. Work has continued to go well beyond my expectations. The promotion I received has led to additional opportunities, including consulting contracts that I never would have been able to pursue if I'd been managing full-time elder care. Last month, my firm asked me to lead a new project helping businesses navigate family succession planning. Ironic, given my recent experiences with family financial dynamics. The extended family reactions have been fascinating to observe. Uncle Robert, who initially supported the guardianship plan, called last month to ask for advice about his own aging mother. I'm seeing the same patterns in my family that you dealt with, he admitted. People getting focused on inheritance instead of care. How do I protect my mom's autonomy? 3 of my cousins have reached out for similar conversations. Apparently, my experience with resisting family financial pressure has made me the unofficial expert on boundary setting and elder advocacy. It's a role I never expected, but one that feels meaningful and important. Dr. Kim, my therapist, says this outcome represents successful differentiation, maintaining family connections while refusing to be controlled by family dysfunction. You've learned to love your family without letting them manipulate you, she explained. That's one of the hardest psychological achievements for people from enmeshed family systems. The therapy sessions have helped me understand patterns that go back generations. My grandfather, Gran's husband, was apparently the family fixer who solved everyone else's problems at the expense of his own goals. Gran never wanted me to repeat that pattern, which explains why she was so supportive when I refused the guardianship role. Your grandfather was a wonderful man, but he never learned to say no to family demands, she told me recently. He worked 2 jobs to pay for his brother's medical school, gave up his dream of starting his own business to help his parents keep their farm, always put everyone else's needs first. She paused, looking thoughtful. I spent 40 years watching him sacrifice his happiness for people who took his generosity for granted. I didn't want to see you make the same choices. Gran turned 90 last month, and we threw her a birthday party that revealed how rich her chosen community has become. 47 people attended, including residents from Sunrise Manor who've become her closest friends, staff members who genuinely care about her well-being, and a handful of family members who respect her choices and autonomy. The elementary school student she reads to made her birthday cards. Her bridge partners organized a surprise tournament in her honor. The facility's activities director created a photo display showing Gran's first year at Sunrise Manor. Pictures of her garden, her book club, her volunteer work, her social activities. As she blew out the candles on her cake, Gran looked around the room with absolute contentment. "This," she whispered to me, "is what happiness looks like when you're surrounded by people who love you for who you are, not what you have." She's absolutely right. Real happiness isn't compliance with family expectations or sacrificing autonomy for false peace. It's choosing relationships with people who respect your decisions, support your independence, and love you without conditions or hidden agendas. The inheritance lawsuit that Marcus threatened never materialized. It turns out that Gran's legal preparation was thorough and bulletproof, and no attorney would take a case against a competent, elderly woman's documented right to control her own assets. We reviewed the medical assessments, the competency evaluations, and the video documentation of her decision-making process. Marcus's lawyer apparently told him, "Your grandmother clearly understands her choices and their consequences. There's no legal basis for challenging her autonomy." The care management arrangement continues to work beautifully. Janet, the geriatric care manager, has become not just a professional support, but a genuine advocate for Gran's interests. She helps coordinate medical appointments, reviews insurance claims, and provides objective advice about health and safety issues. Everything my family claimed they wanted to do, but with professional competence and without conflicts of interest. Last month, when Gran had a minor fall that required an emergency room visit, Janet was there within an hour to coordinate care, communicate with doctors, and ensure Gran's preferences were respected. The incident was handled efficiently and professionally, with Gran returning home the same day and resuming her normal activities within 48 hours. If you had been her legal guardian living 3 states away, Sarah pointed out, that emergency would have been much more complicated and stressful for everyone involved. The most meaningful development has been the deepening of my relationship with Gran herself. Free from the pressure and manipulation of family financial schemes, we've been able to build a connection based on genuine mutual affection and respect. Our Sunday lunches have become sacred time. We sit in Sunrise Manor's dining room, sharing meals with her friends and discussing everything from current events to family history to her decades of teaching experience. She tells me stories about her childhood, her marriage to my grandfather, her career, her dreams and disappointments and victories. "I feel like I'm finally getting to know you as a person, not just as my grandmother," I told her recently. "That's because you're finally seeing me as a person instead of a problem to be managed," she replied with characteristic insight. The cooking lessons have become a weekly tradition. Every Wednesday evening, we meet in the facility's community kitchen where Gran teaches me recipes she's perfected over decades. Apple pie, pot roast, chocolate chip cookies that she's been making since the 1960s. Skills and knowledge she wants to pass on, but had never found the right opportunity to share. "These recipes are part of our family history," she says as we measure flour and roll dough. "Your grandfather's favorite meals, the dishes I made for your parents when they were children, the desserts I brought to school potlucks and church socials." Last week, she gave me a handwritten cookbook, 60 pages of her favorite recipes with notes about when to use each one, what occasions they're best for, how to adapt them for different dietary needs. "For when you and Sarah have your own family," she said, "so our traditions continue." The engagement has brought unexpected dimensions to our relationship. Gran has become Sarah's enthusiastic mentor, sharing advice about marriage, career, and balancing personal goals with family responsibilities. "She's not getting a husband, she's getting a partner," Gran told me after spending an afternoon with Sarah planning wedding details. "I can see how you two make decisions together, how you respect each other's opinions. That's what marriage should look like." Wedding planning with Gran has been an adventure. At 90, she has definite opinions about flowers, music, catering, and ceremony logistics. But her suggestions come from decades of experience and genuine care for our happiness, rather than attempts to control or manipulate. "I want your wedding to reflect who you are as a couple," she said when we were discussing venue options. "Not who your families think you should be or what other people expect. This day is about you and Sarah making promises to each other." We've decided to have the ceremony next spring in the garden behind Sunrise Manor, with reception in the community center. It's unconventional but perfect. A celebration in the place where Gran has found happiness and community, surrounded by the people who've supported our relationship without trying to exploit it. The extended family dynamics continue to evolve in interesting ways. Several relatives who initially supported the guardianship plan have reached out to apologize and rebuild relationships on healthier terms. Aunt Diane sent a long letter acknowledging that she'd been caught up in family pressure without thinking critically about Gran's actual needs or wishes. "I'm sorry I supported something that would have hurt someone I love," she wrote. "I'm proud of you for being stronger than the rest of us." Cousin Jennifer, who'd sent that guilt-laden email about elderly people dying alone, called to admit she'd been manipulated by Emma into participating in the pressure campaign. "I never actually spoke with your grandmother about what she wanted," she confessed. "I just assumed Emma's version of the situation was accurate." The most surprising reconciliation came from Uncle Robert, who drove down from Colorado Springs last month to visit Gran and apologize in person for supporting the guardianship scheme. "I was worried about my own mother's future care, and I let that fear override my judgment about your grandmother's situation," he told her. "You're clearly thriving here, and I was wrong to support taking that away from you. Gran accepted his apology with characteristic grace, while making it clear that trust would need to be rebuilt over time. I appreciate your honesty, Robert, but I also need you to understand that my happiness and autonomy aren't negotiable, regardless of what other family members might prefer. The ripple effects of this situation have extended far beyond our immediate family. Sarah's work in social services has given her insights into how common financial elder abuse really is, and we've started volunteering together with a local organization that provides advocacy for seniors facing family pressure. What happened with your grandmother is textbook elder financial abuse, the organization's director told us during volunteer training. Family members creating artificial crises, rushing legal proceedings, isolating the elder person from independent advice, it's a pattern we see repeatedly. Working with other families facing similar situations has been both heartbreaking and empowering. Last month, we helped a 78-year-old man resist his adult children's attempts to force him into a nursing home so they could sell his house and divide the proceeds. The case had eerily similar elements: manufactured concerns about safety, rushed timelines, family members who'd done extensive financial research before expressing any interest in their father's well-being. Your experience gives you credibility with families who are dealing with these pressures, the director explained. You understand the emotional manipulation, the guilt tactics, the way financial pressure can masquerade as care and concern. The volunteer work has also helped me process my own family's behavior with greater understanding and less anger. Many of the adult children we encounter aren't evil or malicious. They're anxious about their own financial security, influenced by cultural messages about inheritance and family obligation, or simply unable to see past their own needs to consider what's best for their elderly relative. Emma wasn't a villain, Sarah pointed out after we'd worked with a particularly difficult case involving siblings fighting over their mother's care decisions. She was scared about money, influenced by cultural expectations, and caught up in family dynamics that prioritize financial security over individual autonomy. That perspective has made it easier to rebuild relationships with family members who've acknowledged their mistakes and committed to different behavior going forward. Emma and I now talk regularly, and she's become a supportive presence in Gran's life, without any hidden agendas or manipulative tactics. I'm learning to love people without trying to control them, Emma said during one of our recent conversations. It's harder than I expected, but the relationships are so much more genuine and satisfying. The transformation in family dynamics has been remarkable to observe. Sunday dinners at my parents' house, when they happen, are now genuinely social occasions rather than opportunities for manipulation or pressure. Conversations focus on current events, work updates, the grandchildren's activities, and shared memories rather than financial planning or inheritance management. Gran attends these dinners occasionally, when she feels like it, always with the understanding that she can leave whenever she wants and return to her own home. The change in power dynamics has made these gatherings more relaxed and enjoyable for everyone involved. I like spending time with you all when it's my choice rather than my obligation, she told the family during a recent dinner, when I know I'm wanted for my company rather than needed for my assets. The financial aspects of Gran's situation have stabilized beautifully. Her monthly expenses at Sunrise Manor remain manageable and predictable. The care management fee provides valuable services without creating dependency or loss of autonomy. Her investment accounts continue to grow steadily, ensuring long-term security without family interference or manipulation. Most importantly, she's spending money on things that bring her joy. Last month, she hired a driver to take her to the Denver Art Museum, something she'd been wanting to do but had been afraid to arrange on her own. She's purchased a new wardrobe of clothes that reflect her personal style rather than practical care considerations. She's upgraded her apartment at Sunrise Manor with artwork and furniture that make the space truly her own. I spent so many years saving and being careful with money, she told me recently. Now I'm finally old enough to spend some of it on things that make me happy, and I have the freedom to make those choices without family members questioning or controlling my decisions. The wedding planning has given us opportunities to create new family traditions while honoring the healthy relationships that have emerged from this crisis. Instead of traditional bachelor and bachelorette parties, Sarah and I are planning a joint celebration at Sunrise Manor, a potluck dinner with Gran's friends, family members who support our relationship, and the community that has become central to our lives. I want our wedding to reflect our values, Sarah said when we were discussing the guest list. People who support love without conditions, who respect autonomy and choice, who understand that family is about more than blood or obligation. Gran has taken charge of creating wedding favors, small potted plants from cuttings she's grown in the facility's garden room. Everyone who comes to your wedding should take home something that will grow and flourish, she explained, like your marriage, like the healthy relationships we've all learned to build. The symbolism is perfect and deeply meaningful. Plants that will thrive with proper care and attention, that will grow stronger over time, that will eventually produce their own flowers and seeds for future growth. Looking ahead, I feel optimistic about the future in ways I never expected 6 months ago. The crisis that initially seemed so devastating has ultimately led to stronger relationships, better boundaries, and a clearer understanding of what family love actually looks like when it's healthy and genuine. Gran's 90th birthday celebration was just the beginning. We're planning a family reunion next summer, not the obligatory gathering driven by guilt and manipulation, but a genuine celebration, including only people who want to be there and who respect each other's autonomy and choices. I want to invite people who make me feel energized rather than drained, Gran said when we were discussing the guest list. People who ask about my happiness rather than my assets, who care about my opinions rather than my inheritance plans. The guest list includes Sunrise Manor residents who've become chosen family, extended relatives who've rebuilt relationships on healthier terms, and new friends we've made through volunteer work and community involvement. It will be a celebration of the life Gran has built for herself and the relationships that have emerged from her courage to resist manipulation and maintain her autonomy. As I finish writing this update, Gran is in her apartment getting ready for our weekly Wednesday cooking lesson. Tonight, she's teaching me how to make her famous dinner rolls, a recipe she learned from her own grandmother during the Great Depression. These rolls fed our family during the hardest times, she told me last week. Not because we had to make them, but because making them together gave us reasons to gather, to share stories, to remember that family is about love and support rather than obligation and control. That's the real inheritance she's given me, not money or property, but the understanding that authentic relationships require respect for individual autonomy, that love doesn't come with strings attached or hidden agendas, that family support should enhance rather than diminish personal freedom and dignity. Tomorrow night, Sarah and I are taking Gran to see The Sound of Music at the Buell Theater, her early Christmas present, and something she's been looking forward to for weeks. We'll share dinner beforehand at her favorite Italian restaurant, the one with tiramisu that makes her eyes light up with anticipation. These simple pleasures, these chosen activities, these relationships built on mutual respect and genuine affection. This is what happiness looks like when you're free from manipulation and pressure, when you're surrounded by people who love you for who you are rather than what you can provide. The inheritance trap that my family constructed was never really about Gran's care or well-being. It was about control, about money, about the assumption that compliance with family pressure was more important than individual autonomy and dignity. By refusing to participate in that scheme, I didn't just protect Gran's assets and independence. I discovered my own strength, built healthier relationship patterns, and learned what authentic family love actually looks like when it's freely given and respectfully received. That knowledge will guide every relationship decision for the rest of my life. When Sarah and I have children, we'll teach them about boundaries and autonomy along with love and responsibility. When we eventually face our own aging and end-of-life decisions, we'll approach them with the understanding that respect and dignity matter more than control or convenience. The courage to do what's right over what's easy. That's the only inheritance that truly matters, the only legacy worth leaving, the only family tradition worth preserving and passing on to future generations. Have you experienced similar family pressure around elderly relatives and financial decisions? How did you navigate the guilt, manipulation, and complex emotions when family interests conflicted with individual autonomy? Share your stories in the comments. This type of elder abuse is more common than anyone wants to admit, and sharing experiences helps others recognize and resist these harmful patterns. Remember, your life belongs to you first. Your autonomy deserves protection, and real family love supports individual dignity rather than demanding its sacrifice. These principles apply whether you're 31 like me, 90 like Gran, or anywhere in between. Thanks for reading, and remember, standing up for what's right is never easy, but it's always worth it.